The morning Sophia Coleman finally left Richard's mansion did not begin with shouting. That was the strange part. After years of insults, emotional pain, cold silence, and broken promises, the end of their marriage arrived quietly. No dramatic screaming, no crashing dishes, no final apology. Just one exhausted woman standing beside a suitcase at sunrise while her children slept upstairs, wondering if leaving was the only way left to save herself before she disappeared completely inside a life that no longer felt human. And what Richard Coleman did next would become the biggest mistake of his entire life. Because instead of stopping her, he laughed. He looked directly at the woman who had spent years sacrificing herself for him and said the words that would eventually destroy him emotionally forever. Go wherever you want, Sophia. You'll come crawling back eventually. But what Richard did not know was that Sophia Coleman was about to become the one thing he could never control again. And while Richard continued wasting his fortune on another woman, someone else was quietly helping Sophia rebuild her confidence, her career, and eventually her entire future. The frightening part? Richard wouldn't realize he was losing everything until it was already gone. Before we continue, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. And stay until the end of this story because what Vanessa Blake secretly planned behind Richard's back would shock everyone around him. Sophia stood near the front door that morning, gripping the handle of her suitcase tightly, while her heart pounded uncontrollably inside her chest. Ethan stood beside her carrying a small backpack, while little Lily held Sophia's hand quietly. The mansion felt colder than ever before. Empty, lifeless, like the walls themselves were tired of witnessing pain every day. Richard sat comfortably in the living room, scrolling through messages on his phone as if nothing important was happening. "You're seriously doing this?" he asked casually without even looking up properly. Sophia swallowed hard before answering. "I can't stay here anymore." Richard laughed softly. "You'll survive maybe 2 weeks before reality hits you." Sophia remained silent. That silence irritated him more than anger ever could. For years, Richard had controlled every argument because Sophia always reacted emotionally. She cried. She explained herself. She defended herself. But now there was something different in her eyes. Not fear. Not sadness. Distance. Emotional distance. And suddenly Richard realized something uncomfortable. Sophia no longer needed him emotionally the way she once did. "You're making a mistake," Richard said coldly. Sophia looked at him for a long moment before quietly replying, "No, Richard. Staying was the mistake." The room became silent. Even Jason, standing quietly near the staircase, looked stunned hearing Sophia finally speak without fear. Then Richard shook his head dismissively. "Fine. Leave. You'll come back when life gets difficult." But before Sophia could respond, Ethan suddenly spoke. "No, she won't." Richard turned sharply toward his son. "What?" Ethan's eyes filled with anger. "You don't deserve her." The tension inside the mansion became suffocating. Richard stood up immediately. "You're becoming disrespectful, just like someone who's tired of watching you hurt Mom." Ethan interrupted emotionally. Sophia immediately stepped closer. "Ethan." But Ethan was already crying from years of bottled frustration. "You always choose everybody else over us." Richard looked shocked for a second because deep down, he knew the boy was telling the truth. Then Jason finally stepped forward. "Dad, just stop." Richard stared at him angrily. "Not you two." Jason looked directly at his father. "She stayed loyal to this family while you humiliated her every single day." Richard scoffed defensively. "You all act like I'm some villain." Nobody answered. And somehow, that silence said more than words ever could. Sophia slowly opened the front door while tears burned in her eyes. She had imagined leaving this house 1,000 times before, but now that the moment had finally arrived, it still felt terrifying. Not because she doubted leaving, but because she had spent so many years forgetting who she was outside this marriage. As she stepped outside holding her children's hands, Richard spoke one last time. "You'll regret this." Sophia paused briefly without turning around. Then she quietly said, "No, Richard. One day you will." And with that, she walked away. The mansion door closed behind her, and the sound echoed through Richard's chest in a way he did not understand yet. At first, Richard convinced himself the separation was temporary. He assumed Sophia would quickly realize how difficult life outside luxury truly was. He expected emotional phone calls. He expected begging. He expected weakness. Instead, Days passed without hearing from her. Then weeks. And something about that unsettled him deeply. Meanwhile, Sophia and the children moved into a modest apartment across the city near Mia Harper's cafe. Compared to the mansion, the apartment was small. The furniture barely matched. The kitchen was tiny. But for the first time in years, the home felt peaceful. No shouting. No fear. No tension every time a car pulled into the driveway. The first night there, Ethan looked around nervously and asked a question Sophia would never forget. "Mom." "Yes." "Why does this place already feel happier?" Sophia nearly broke down crying hearing that. Because children always know the truth adults try to hide. That night, while Lily slept peacefully beside stuffed animals on the couch, and Ethan quietly unpacked boxes, Sophia sat alone near the apartment window staring at city lights outside. Her life had completely changed, and for the first time in years, she had absolutely no idea what would happen next. That uncertainty terrified her. But strangely, it also made her feel alive again. A few days later, Daniel Hayes visited the apartment carrying groceries and supplies for the children. "You didn't have to do this," Sophia said immediately. Daniel smiled gently. "Maybe I wanted to." Ethan quickly helped carry bags inside, while Lily happily showed Daniel her drawings taped against the apartment wall. And as Sophia watched the interaction quietly, something emotional happened inside her chest. Daniel never tried impressing anyone loudly. He simply showed up. Consistently. Calmly. Kindly. The exact opposite of Richard. Over the following weeks, Daniel continued helping Sophia quietly without making her feel dependent or ashamed. He connected her with people who could help her restart professionally. He encouraged her photography again after discovering she once loved it. He even surprised her one afternoon with a secondhand professional camera after hearing Mia mention Sophia sold hers years earlier during financial pressure inside the marriage. Sophia stared at the camera emotionally. "I can't accept this." Daniel smiled softly. "Why?" "Because nobody's done something thoughtful for me in a very long time." Daniel looked at her carefully before replying. "That says more about the people around you than it says about you." Those words stayed in Sophia's heart long after he left. Back at the mansion, Richard's behavior became worse after Sophia moved out. Instead of reflecting on his actions, he buried himself deeper inside distractions. More expensive dinners, more drinking, more nights with Vanessa. But underneath all of it, something was changing. The mansion no longer felt powerful. It felt empty. One evening, Richard entered the house expecting silence, only to realize how deeply he hated it now. Ethan's laughter no longer echoed through hallways. Lily's toys were gone. Sophia's presence had disappeared from every room. For the first time in years, Richard finally understood something uncomfortable. The warmth inside that house had never come from money. It came from Sophia. And without her there, everything suddenly felt cold. Still, Richard refused admitting that truth aloud. Instead, he called Vanessa. "Come stay over tonight." Vanessa smiled while applying lipstick inside her luxury apartment. "Of course, baby." But Vanessa had her own plans, already developing quietly behind the scenes. Over the past year, she had learned almost everything about Richard's financial empire. She understood how his company operated. She knew which investments were vulnerable. She knew which legal documents he signed carelessly without reading. And most importantly, she knew Richard trusted her blindly. Meanwhile, Sophia slowly began rebuilding herself emotionally. Daniel introduced her to a woman named Claire Whitmore, a successful gallery owner who specialized in emotional documentary photography. After seeing several old photographs Sophia had taken years earlier, Claire became genuinely impressed. "You have talent," Claire said honestly. Sophia looked shocked hearing those words because nobody had complimented her abilities sincerely in years. Richard spent so long criticizing her that she forgot she was capable of anything valuable at all. Claire eventually offered Sophia part-time work helping organize exhibitions and photography events. The money wasn't enormous, but it gave Sophia something far more important: confidence, purpose, identity. For the first time in years, she woke up feeling excited instead of emotionally exhausted. And slowly, everybody around her began noticing the transformation. Her smile returned gradually. Her posture changed. Her voice became stronger. Even Ethan noticed. "You laugh more now," he told her one evening during dinner. Sophia looked surprised. "Do I?" Ethan nodded. "You used to look sad all the time at the mansion." Sophia became emotional hearing that because children observe pain far more deeply than adults realize. At the same time, Richard's relationship with Vanessa grew increasingly toxic beneath the glamorous surface. Vanessa became more demanding financially. She pressured Richard constantly for access to luxury accounts, investment properties, and business authority. Richard ignored the warning signs because Vanessa still made him feel admired. But admiration built on manipulation always comes with a price eventually. One night during dinner at a luxury restaurant, Vanessa casually asked, "Have you ever thought about giving me a bigger role in your company?" Richard smirked proudly. "Why?" "Because I understand business better than you think." Richard laughed lightly. "Maybe one day." Vanessa smiled back sweetly while hiding irritation behind her eyes. Because she was tired of waiting. Weeks later, Sophia attended her first photography event through Claire's gallery. She felt nervous walking into the building because it had been years since she existed in spaces that belonged to her instead of Richard's world. But that night changed everything. People admired her work genuinely. Strangers complimented her perspective and emotional storytelling through photography. One older man even purchased one of her framed city photographs immediately. Sophia nearly cried after the sale because the moment represented far more than money. It represented proof. Proof that she still mattered outside marriage. Daniel noticed tears forming in her eyes afterward. "You okay?" he asked softly. Sophia laughed emotionally. "I forgot what it felt like to be proud of myself." Daniel looked at her carefully for a second. "Then maybe this is the beginning of finding yourself again." That sentence stayed with her the entire night. Meanwhile, Richard accidentally discovered photographs online from the gallery event. Sophia was smiling in them. Actually smiling. And standing beside Daniel. Something ugly twisted inside Richard's chest immediately. Not regret exactly. Possession. Because men like Richard often believe they own people emotionally even after destroying them. He stared at the photos repeatedly before calling Sophia impulsively for the first time in weeks. Sophia answered cautiously. "What do you want, Richard?" "I saw the pictures." Sophia remained silent. "So now you're running around with another man?" The accusation shocked her. "Are you serious right now?" Richard's voice hardened immediately. "You leave my house, and suddenly you're smiling in public with some stranger?" Sophia finally lost patience. "For years you humiliated me while sleeping with another woman openly. That's different." Sophia laughed bitterly. "No, Richard. The difference is that Daniel actually treats me like a human being." That sentence hit Richard harder than he expected. Because deep down, he knew it was true. The call ended badly. And afterward, Richard became more unstable emotionally than ever before. He started drinking heavily alone inside the mansion. He ignored important meetings. He snapped aggressively at employees. Even Jason stopped visiting regularly because every conversation with his father turned hostile. One evening, Jason confronted him directly. "You're angry because Mom finally realized she deserved better." Richard slammed a whiskey glass onto the counter. "She poisoned all of you against me." Jason stared at him in disbelief. "No, Dad. Your actions did that." Richard looked away angrily. But Jason wasn't finished. "You know what's crazy? Mom still defended you for years, even while you hurt her." The room became silent. Then Jason quietly added, "And you still lost her." For the first time, Richard had no response. Meanwhile, Sophia's professional opportunities continued growing rapidly. Claire introduced her to more industry connections. Her photography gained attention online. She began earning enough money to support herself comfortably without relying on Richard financially. That independence changed her completely. For years, Richard controlled her emotionally, partly because she feared surviving without him. Now that fear was disappearing. And once fear disappears, control disappears with it. One afternoon, Daniel took Sophia and the children to a quiet lakeside park outside the city. Lily collected flowers happily while Ethan skipped rocks near the water. Sophia watched them quietly. Peacefully, Daniel sat beside her on a bench before speaking softly. "You know something?" "What?" "You look lighter now." Sophia smiled slightly. "I feel lighter." Daniel nodded. "You survived something difficult." Sophia looked toward the lake thoughtfully. "I used to think love meant sacrificing yourself completely for somebody." Daniel remained quiet, listening. "But now," Sophia continued softly, "I think real love should feel safe." Daniel looked at her carefully after hearing that sentence. And in that moment, both of them understood something was growing emotionally between them. Not rushed, Not forced. Not toxic. Just honest. But neither said it aloud yet. Back at the mansion, Vanessa secretly accelerated her plans against Richard. She convinced him to sign several investment documents during nights filled with alcohol and distractions. Richard trusted her completely by now. Too completely. One evening, Vanessa sat alone reviewing company paperwork while smiling quietly to herself. Because she already knew something Richard did not. Very soon, everything he built would belong to her instead. And the terrifying part? Richard was walking directly into the trap willingly. Meanwhile, Sophia finally filed official divorce paperwork. When Richard received the documents, rage exploded through him instantly. He stormed directly into Mia's cafe after learning Sophia was there meeting Daniel. The moment Richard entered, tension filled the entire cafe immediately. Sophia stood up slowly. Richard? No. He snapped angrily while staring at Daniel. So this is the guy replacing me? Daniel remained calm. You should lower your voice. Richard stepped closer aggressively. You stay out of this. But Daniel refused, backing down. She doesn't deserve being spoken to like this anymore. Richard laughed bitterly. You think you know her? Daniel answered calmly. I know she spent years surviving pain she never deserved. Sophia stared at Daniel emotionally after hearing those words. Nobody had defended her publicly like that before. Richard noticed immediately, and for the first time, he realized Sophia was truly slipping beyond his control emotionally forever. You're embarrassing yourself, Sophia whispered quietly. Richard looked stunned hearing her say that. Then Sophia continued. I begged for your love for years, Richard. The cafe became silent. But now, I'm just tired. Something about the sadness in her voice hit harder than anger ever could. Because Richard suddenly understood one painful truth. Sophia no longer hated him. And sometimes indifference hurts more than hatred. Richard left the cafe furious. But as he drove away alone through city traffic, something terrifying finally settled inside his chest. For the first time since Sophia walked away, he genuinely believed she might never come back. And unfortunately for Richard Coleman, his worst nightmare was only beginning. Before this story continues, take a moment to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next chapter of this emotional journey. Stories like this are more than just entertainment. They reflect real emotions, real mistakes, real heartbreak, and the painful consequences that many families experience behind closed doors every single day. Stay tuned for part 3 because the downfall, the regret, and the final emotional ending are far more painful than anyone expects. And if this story touched you emotionally, let us know in the comments. What lesson did you learn from Sophia and Richard's story?